There is a difference between being kind and losing yourself in the process. Many people spend years believing that being endlessly available, patient, and agreeable will naturally earn them love, loyalty, and respect. But real life often teaches a harder truth. People do not always value what is freely given without limits. Sometimes the kindest people are the most exhausted, overlooked, and emotionally drained because they have spent too long making everyone else comfortable while ignoring their own needs. This journey is not about becoming rude, cold, or selfish. It is about learning how to protect your peace without losing your heart. It is about understanding that respect begins within, and that the way you treat yourself teaches others how to treat you. When you stop apologizing for your needs, stop shrinking to avoid conflict, and stop carrying burdens that do not belong to you, something powerful changes. You begin to feel stronger, clearer, and more at peace. This book will help you understand why overgiving happens, how unhealthy patterns are formed, and what practical steps can help you become calm, confident, and respected without losing your natural goodness. The goal is not to become feared. The goal is to become someone whose kindness has value because it is grounded in self-respect. Chapter 1. Understanding the cost of always saying yes. Being kind is often praised as one of the finest qualities a person can have. A kind person is thoughtful, patient, helpful, and emotionally available. They listen when others need support. They adjust when situations become difficult. They try to keep peace rather than create conflict. These qualities are valuable and beautiful when they come from strength. But when kindness slowly turns into self-neglect, it stops being healthy and starts becoming harmful. Many people who are too kind do not notice when the shift happens. It rarely begins in a dramatic way. It often starts with small habits that feel harmless. Saying yes when you want to say no. Staying quiet when something hurts. Smiling through discomfort so that nobody feels upset. These moments seem small at first, but over time they create a pattern. In that pattern, your needs become less important, and other people become used to receiving from you without limits. The biggest cost of always saying yes is not only tiredness, it is the gradual loss of self-respect. Every time you ignore your own feelings to protect someone else from discomfort, you send yourself a silent message that your needs matter less. The mind remembers this message. After enough repetition, you begin to doubt your own right to take space, rest, speak honestly, or choose yourself. This creates emotional exhaustion that many people cannot explain. They may look calm on the outside and even appear successful or dependable, but inside they often feel heavy, frustrated, and unseen. They become the person everyone calls when there is a problem. Yet very few people ask how they are truly doing this. Hidden imbalance creates resentment and guilt at the same time. You feel angry for being overlooked, but guilty for wanting more. One of the most painful truths about overkindness is that people can become comfortable with your sacrifices when you constantly give your time, money, attention, or emotional energy without limits. Many people stop seeing it as generosity and start seeing it as normal. This does not always mean they are bad people. Sometimes it simply means that human beings adapt to what is repeatedly available. If you always carry the emotional load, others may unconsciously stop carrying their share. This is why being endlessly available does not automatically create respect. In many cases, it creates dependency, convenience, and expectation. Respect is not built through silent suffering. Respect grows when people can see that you value yourself, that your time matters, and that your care is offered by choice, not by pressure. Understanding this truth can feel uncomfortable, especially if you have spent years believing that being needed makes you valuable. Many people tie their worth to how useful they are. They feel important when solving problems, fixing emotions, or rescuing situations. But this kind of worth is unstable because it depends on external approval. The moment someone is disappointed or upset, you may feel anxious or rejected. Real confidence is different. Real confidence comes from knowing that your value does not depend on how much you give away. You do not have to earn basic respect by overworking, over-explaining, or over-pleasing. You are worthy even when you rest, even when you say no, and even when someone does not like your boundary learning. This is not easy because people-pleasing is often rooted in fear. Some fear abandonment, some fear conflict, some fear being misunderstood, rejected, or seen as selfish. In many cases, these fears were shaped by childhood family patterns or past relationships where love felt conditional. A person may have learned very early that peace came from staying quiet and approval came from being useful. That survival pattern may have protected you once, but it can damage your adult life if left unchanged. A life built around keeping everyone comfortable will eventually make you uncomfortable in your own skin. You may lose touch with what you actually want because you become so focused on managing other people's emotions. The first step toward change is honesty. You must be willing to notice where your yes is not genuine. Where are you agreeing out of fear? Where are you staying silent to avoid tension? Where are you giving from pressure instead of peace? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to help you see the hidden cost of your habits. The moment you become aware of your pattern, you begin to take your power back. Awareness creates choice. Once you can see what is draining you, you no longer have to keep repeating it. You can begin creating a different kind of life, one where kindness still exists, but no longer comes at the cost of your dignity. Example 1. A worker stays late every day because they do not want their boss to think they are uncommitted. At first, this feels responsible, but after months they become exhausted, irritable, and disconnected from their family. Their coworkers begin assuming they will always handle extra tasks because they never refuse. What started as dedication slowly became silent self-sacrifice. Example 2. A friend in a social group always adjusts plans for everyone else. They change their schedule, lend money, listen to every crisis, and avoid expressing disappointment because they want to seem supportive. Over time, the group begins expecting their flexibility instead of appreciating it. The friend feels lonely and resentful because they are always present for others, but rarely feel truly considered. Chapter 2. Why people cross boundaries and stop valuing your kindness. One of the hardest realities to accept is that people often treat you according to the standards you quietly allow. This truth can feel painful at first because it forces you to look beyond blaming others and begin understanding your own patterns. But this understanding is also powerful because once you see the pattern clearly, you can begin to change it. Many people believe that if they are good enough, patient enough, and generous enough, others will naturally respect them. In an ideal world, this would always be true, but in real life, respect is not created only by good intentions. Respect is also shaped by clarity, consistency, and limits. When you are unclear about your own boundaries, other people often become careless with them. Boundary is not a wall meant to push people away. It is a clear understanding of what is acceptable for your time, energy, emotions, and values. Boundaries tell people how to be in your life without harming your peace. They are not selfish. They are necessary for healthy relationships. People cross boundaries for many reasons. Some do it because they are naturally self-focused. Some do it because they are used to taking more than they give. Some do it without even realizing it, because you have trained them through repetition. If every time someone asks for a favor, you say yes, even when it hurts you, they learn that access to your time has no limit. If every time someone speaks to you disrespectfully, you stay silent, they may assume that silence means acceptance. This is why unspoken resentment becomes dangerous. Many people who are too kind expect others to notice their sacrifices without needing to say anything. They hope people will appreciate the effort and one day return the same care, but silent expectations often lead to silent disappointment. People cannot always read what you never clearly express. There is also an emotional pattern that keeps many people trapped in this cycle. They fear that setting boundaries will make them look selfish, rude, difficult, or unlovable. This fear causes them to over-explain, apologize too much, and accept things that deeply bother them. They may smile while feeling uncomfortable because they believe keeping peace is more important than protecting themselves, but avoiding discomfort today often creates bigger pain tomorrow. Every time you tolerate something that feels wrong just to avoid an awkward conversation, you increase the chance that the same behavior will happen again. What you allow repeatedly becomes the new normal. This does not mean you are responsible for other people's bad behavior. If someone is manipulative, cruel, or disrespectful, it is still their choice. But your responsibility is to protect your own space instead of hoping they will suddenly change. Without clear feedback. Healthy people respect clarity. Even if they feel surprised at first, they can adjust. Unhealthy people may resist because your boundaries remove the benefits they were receiving from your silence. This is why setting limits can reveal who truly values you and who only valued your convenience. Learning to set boundaries is not about becoming harsh. It is about becoming honest. You can be calm and respectful while still being firm. You can care deeply about someone and still refuse what harms you. In fact, clear boundaries often improve relationships because they remove hidden resentment and create honesty. Respect grows when your words and actions match. If you say something bothers you, but continue accepting it, nothing changes. But when you calmly repeat your standard and follow through, people begin to understand that your limits are real. This is where self-trust begins. You do not need to wait until you are completely exhausted to start protecting yourself. The earlier you speak, the easier it becomes. Small moments matter. Saying no to something minor can become the first step toward changing your entire life pattern. It is important to remember that boundaries are not about controlling others. You cannot control what people ask for, how they react, or whether they understand immediately. What you can control is what you accept, what you participate in, and how you respond. That is where your power lies. Many people spend years feeling used because they are waiting for others to finally notice their pain. But waiting rarely changes patterns. Clear action does. The moment you stop over-explaining and start honoring your own limits, you begin teaching people something new. You teach them that your kindness is not unlimited access. It is a gift offered with self-respect. Example 1. A family member constantly asks for money and emotional support because you have always stepped in without question. You feel stressed every time they call, but still help because you fear seeming uncaring. One day you calmly explain that you can support them in some ways, but cannot continue solving every crisis for them. At first they react with surprise, but over time the relationship becomes more balanced because the pattern has changed. Example 2. A colleague regularly interrupts you in meetings and takes credit for shared ideas. You stay silent because you do not want tension, but inside you feel frustrated. Eventually, you begin speaking clearly and confidently. When interrupted, you say that you would like to finish your point before moving on. That one simple change starts shifting how others in the room treat you. Chapter 3. The difference between kindness and weakness. Many people confuse kindness with softness and softness with weakness. This confusion causes deep problems because it teaches people to believe that being agreeable all the time is a sign of goodness. In reality, true kindness is one of the strongest qualities a person can have because it comes from emotional maturity, patience, and self-control. But when kindness is driven by fear instead of inner strength, it begins to look similar on the outside while feeling very different on the inside. This is where many people become trapped. They think they are being loving, patient, and understanding, when in truth, they are acting from fear, fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being disliked, fear of disappointing others, or fear of losing connection. These fears can make a person extremely accommodating. They become easy to depend on, but difficult to respect because they have slowly stopped standing in their own truth. True kindness comes from choice. Weakness comes from avoidance. A kind person helps because they want to, not because they are afraid to refuse. A kind person listens without losing their voice. They can be compassionate without carrying what does not belong to them. They can forgive without allowing repeated disrespect. They can support others while still protecting their own peace. Weakness, on the other hand, often hides behind politeness. A weak pattern may look like saying yes while feeling angry, staying silent while feeling hurt, agreeing while feeling uncomfortable, or apologizing for things that are not your responsibility. These actions may keep temporary peace, but they create long-term emotional damage because you are constantly betraying yourself in small, invisible ways. One of the clearest signs that your kindness may be rooted in fear is resentment. Resentment is often the emotional result of giving what you did not truly want to give. It builds when your outer behavior and inner truth do not match. You smile but feel drained. You help but feel unappreciated. You stay but feel unseen. This emotional split slowly damages your confidence because it teaches your mind that your feelings are not safe to honor. A strong person understands that being kind does not require becoming available to everyone all the time. They know that saying no can be an act of honesty. They know that disagreement is not cruelty. They know that protecting their energy is not selfishness, but responsibility. Strength is often quiet. It does not always shout or dominate a room. Real inner strength appears in moments where you remain calm under pressure, where you speak clearly without aggression, where you walk away from disrespect without needing to prove anything. This kind of strength creates natural respect because people sense that your kindness is grounded in self-worth. One reason many people struggle with this is because they were taught that being easy to manage makes them lovable. They may have grown up in homes where expressing needs created tension, or where approval was given only when they were helpful, obedient, or quiet. Over time, they learned that safety came from pleasing others. This coping pattern may have once protected them, but in adulthood, it often becomes a prison. To break this cycle, you must begin separating guilt from truth. Feeling guilty when you set a boundary does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes guilt is simply the feeling of breaking an old, unhealthy pattern. The discomfort you feel while choosing yourself may actually be the beginning of emotional freedom. Another important shift is learning to tolerate being misunderstood. Many people remain trapped in weak patterns because they are terrified of disappointing others. They want everyone to understand their intentions. But strength means accepting that some people may not like your change and choosing honesty anyway. Respect often increases when you stop chasing approval. This does not mean becoming cold, distant, or careless. The goal is not to lose your softness. The goal is to give your softness structure. A river without banks floods everything around it, but a river with direction becomes powerful. In the same way, kindness without boundaries can become self-destruction, while kindness with self-respect becomes influence, stability, and peace. The more you practice acting from choice instead of fear, the more your life begins to change. You feel lighter because you are no longer carrying false roles. You feel calmer because you are no longer performing to earn acceptance. You feel stronger because your actions finally match your truth. This is the moment where kindness becomes powerful. Instead of being something people take for granted, it becomes something people value because they can feel that it comes from confidence, not neediness. You stop shrinking to keep others comfortable and begin standing with quiet certainty in who you are. Example 1. A team leader listens carefully to every member and treats people with respect. But when a decision must be made, they do not avoid responsibility. They make the call clearly and stand by it even if not everyone agrees. Their kindness earns respect because it is paired with confidence and direction. Example 2. A person in a relationship keeps agreeing to plans they dislike because they fear upsetting their partner. Over time, They feel invisible and frustrated. Eventually, they begin expressing what they actually want and what makes them uncomfortable, the relationship. Either becomes healthier through honesty or reveals that it was built on imbalance all. Along Chapter 4, learning to say no without guilt and building the courage to mean it. For many people, the word no feels heavier than it should. A simple refusal can feel like conflict, rejection, selfishness, or risk. This is because saying no is not just a communication skill. It is deeply connected to self-worth, fear, and emotional conditioning. If you have spent years making yourself available to keep peace, then saying no may feel uncomfortable at first, even when it is the healthiest thing you can do. But learning to say no is one of the most important steps in becoming respected, peaceful, and emotionally free. A healthy no protects your energy, time, values, and mental well-being. It is not an attack on someone else. It is an act of honesty toward yourself. Many people think that saying yes makes them kind and saying no makes them difficult. This belief creates a harmful pattern where they begin saying yes to things they do not have the time, energy, or desire to do. They agree to extra work, unwanted plans, emotional labor, and unfair expectations, not because they want to, but because they are afraid of disappointing others at first. This may seem harmless. You tell yourself it is easier to help than to explain. You tell yourself you can manage one more task, one more favor, one more compromise. But over time, each unnecessary yes becomes a quiet burden. You begin feeling stretched thin, mentally tired, and emotionally resentful. The very people you are trying to keep happy may never even realize the cost you are paying. This is why guilt often appears when you first begin setting limits. Guilt is common because your mind is reacting to a broken pattern. If you have always been the one who adjusted, then choosing yourself and feel unfamiliar, but unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Sometimes guilt is simply proof that you are doing something different than what your old habits allowed. A healthy no does not require anger, drama, or long explanations. In fact, the more you explain, the more likely you are to sound unsure and invite negotiation. A strong no is often simple, calm, and respectful. You do not need to justify every choice you make about your own time or energy. Your life does not need to be defended in order to be valid. Saying no also teaches people how to value your yes. If you agree to everything, your agreement loses meaning because it is expected. But when you become selective, your support becomes more genuine and more respected. People begin to understand that your help comes from willingness, not pressure. One of the biggest fears people have about saying no is losing relationships. They worry that people will pull away, become upset, or think badly of them. This fear can feel intense, especially if your identity has been built around being dependable. But it is important to understand something deeply important. A relationship that only works when you abandon yourself is not a healthy relationship. It is an arrangement built on your silence. Real respect is tested when you begin protecting yourself. Healthy people may feel surprised at first, but they can adjust. Unhealthy people may become defensive because your boundaries remove the comfort they had in your overgiving. Their reaction is not proof that you are wrong. It is information about the relationship. Another key part of saying no is timing. Many people wait until they are overwhelmed before they finally speak up. By then, frustration has built and the conversation becomes emotional or explosive. Learning to say no earlier helps prevent resentment. You do not need to wait until you are exhausted to protect your peace. You are allowed to choose your limits before reaching your breaking point. It also helps to understand that no is not always a rejection of a person. Sometimes it is simply a protection of your priorities. You can care about someone and still decline what they ask. You can be loving and unavailable at the same time. You can support someone emotionally without becoming responsible for fixing their life. Your voice becomes stronger each time you use it. The first few times may feel uncomfortable. You may overthink what you said or worry how it was received. But confidence is built through repetition, not perfection. Every honest boundary makes the next one easier because you are teaching yourself that your needs are real and safe to honor there. Is great peace in becoming someone who means what they say? You stop living in hidden resentment and begin living with clarity your relationships. Become more honest because people no longer interact with a false version of you. You stop performing goodness and start practicing self. Respect. The goal is not to say no to everything. The goal is to make your yes intentional, your time attention. Care and presence are valuable. When you stop giving them away out of fear, you begin living with more dignity, energy, and peace than you may have thought possible. Example 1. A coworker often asks you to finish tasks they were supposed to complete. You keep helping because you do not want tension, even though it leaves you stressed and behind on your own work. One day, you calmly tell them that you need to focus on your own deadlines and cannot take on their tasks anymore. They may seem surprised at first, but over time, they stop assuming your time belongs to them. Example 2a. Friend frequently calls late at night to unload their problems while ignoring your need for rest. You care about them, but feel drained every time this happens. Instead of answering out of guilt, you explain kindly that you are not available for late-night calls and can talk during a time that works for you. This small boundary protects your peace and teaches them that care does not mean constant access. Chapter 5. Building presence. Confidence and the kind of energy that naturally commands respect. Respect is not created only by words. It is also created by presence. Presence is the energy you bring into a room, the way you carry yourself, the way you respond under pressure, and the way you treat your own time and attention. Many people who struggle with being too kind focus only on changing what they say, but forget that people also respond to what they feel from you. Your posture, tone, silence, choices, and consistency all communicate something long before your words do. A person who commands respect does not always need to be loud, dominant, or aggressive. In fact, truly respected people are often calm, centered, and emotionally steady. They do not chase approval. They do not rush to explain themselves. They are not constantly trying to prove their worth because they already know their value internally. This inner stability creates a natural presence that others can sense. Many people who overgive struggle with presence because they have spent years shrinking themselves to make others comfortable. They may speak softly, even when they have something important to say. They may laugh off disrespect to avoid awkwardness. They may apologize before expressing a need. They may over-explain their choices because they fear being misunderstood. All of these habits slowly weaken how others perceive them and, more importantly, how they perceive themselves. Building presence begins with rebuilding self. Trust. Self-trust is created every time your actions match your truth. If you constantly ignore your own needs, your mind learns that your voice is not reliable. But when you begin honoring your limits, speaking honestly, and following through on what matters to you, your inner confidence starts becoming real. Confidence is not pretending to be powerful. It is the quiet result of keeping promises to yourself. One of the first ways to build presence is through emotional regulation. People respect those who can remain steady without collapsing or exploding. This does not mean suppressing emotion. It means learning to feel without becoming ruled by every emotion that rises. When someone challenges you, criticizes you, or misunderstands you, your power often lies in your ability to stay calm instead of reacting impulsively. Silence is also a powerful part of presence. Many people who seek approval feel the need to fill every silence, explain every decision, and defend every feeling. But strong presence often includes comfort with pause. A person who can speak clearly and then remain silent without rushing to justify themselves often carries more weight than someone who talks endlessly to gain acceptance. Body language matters too. Way you stand, sit, walk, and make eye contact affects both how people see you and how you feel inside. If you constantly look uncertain, rushed, or apologetic, people may unconsciously respond to that energy. But when you slow down, make steady eye contact, and hold yourself with calm confidence, you begin sending a different message without needing to force anything. Another major part of commanding respect is consistency. Inconsistent people create confusion. If you set a boundary one day and ignore it, the next people will test your limits because they are unclear. But when your actions stay aligned over time, people begin trusting that your words have weight. Consistency creates credibility, and credibility creates respect. It is also important to stop seeking permission to take up space. Many overly kind people wait for validation before speaking, resting, choosing, or changing. They want reassurance that their needs are reasonable, but mature confidence grows when you stop asking others to approve what you already know is right for you. You do not need universal agreement to honor your peace. Presence also grows when you stop rushing to rescue everyone around you. Many people who are too kind carry an unconscious need to fix things quickly. They feel responsible for tension, sadness, conflict, or discomfort in others. This keeps them emotionally overextended and disconnected from themselves. A grounded person understands that not every problem is theirs to solve. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is allow others to face their own consequences while you protect your own. Balance. Commanding respect does not mean becoming intimidating. It means becoming rooted. You stop moving through life as if you must constantly earn your place. You stop shrinking your voice to avoid making others uncomfortable. You stop offering access to your energy simply because someone expects it. Instead, you become someone whose calm clarity creates trust and whose kindness feels valuable because it is offered from strength. This kind of change does not happen overnight. It is built in ordinary moments. It happens when you speak clearly in a meeting instead of staying silent. It happens when you stop apologizing for needing rest. It happens when you walk away from disrespect without needing the last word. It happens when you choose peace over people pleasing even when it feels unfamiliar. The more you practice this, the more your life changes. You begin attracting healthier relationships because your energy becomes clearer. You stop feeling invisible because you are no longer abandoning yourself to be accepted. You begin feeling solid inside, and that inner steadiness becomes visible to everyone around you. Respect that is built through fear never lasts, but respect that is built through presence, integrity, and self-worth becomes lasting and natural. You do not have to force people to notice your value. You only need to stop hiding it. Example 1. A quiet employee used to avoid sharing ideas in meetings because they feared sounding wrong. Over time, they begin preparing their thoughts, speaking clearly, and pausing instead of rushing through their words. Their coworkers begin listening more carefully, not because they became louder, but because they became more certain. Example 2a. Person in a family is used to always calming everyone during conflict and carrying the emotional burden for others. They decide to stop jumping in every time tension rises. Instead, they stay calm, listen, and only speak when necessary. Over time, the family begins handling situations more responsibly because one person stopped carrying everything alone. Chapter 6. Handling pushback, criticism, and guilt without losing yourself. The moment you begin changing old patterns, people will notice. Even if you become more respectful, more honest, and more emotionally balanced, some people may still react negatively. This surprises many people because they assume that becoming healthier will automatically improve every relationship. The truth is more complicated. Change often creates discomfort before it creates peace, especially when others were benefiting from your old behavior. If you had spent years being available, agreeable, and easy to manage, then people may have become comfortable with a version of you that always adjusted. When you begin setting boundaries, speaking honestly, or refusing what drains you, some people may feel disappointed, frustrated, confused, or even offended. This does not always mean they are bad people. Sometimes they are simply reacting to a change in a pattern they had come to expect, but sometimes pushback reveals something deeper. It can expose who truly respected you and who simply enjoyed the access they had to your time, energy, and emotional labor. This can be painful because it forces you to face relationships that may have felt meaningful but were built on unhealthy roles. You may realize that some people liked your usefulness more than your truth. This stage of growth is where many people give up. They start setting boundaries, but the moment someone becomes upset, they feel guilty and retreat back into old habits. They tell themselves it is easier to go back than to deal with tension. But every time you abandon your boundary to avoid discomfort, you teach both yourself and others that your limits are negotiable under pressure. This is why learning to tolerate discomfort is essential. Emotional growth often feels uncomfortable, not because it is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. If you have always linked peace with pleasing others, then standing up for yourself can feel like danger, even when it is healthy. Your body may react with anxiety, guilt, overthinking, or fear of rejection. This does not mean you should stop. It means you are stretching beyond an old survival pattern. One of the most important skills during this phase is emotional steadiness. You do not need to match someone else's intensity in order to protect yourself. If someone becomes defensive, upset, or manipulative when you express a need, your power often lies in staying calm. A calm person with clear boundaries is much harder to control than an anxious person who feels the need to explain everything. It is also important to stop over-explaining yourself. Many people who fear conflict think they can make everyone comfortable if they just explain enough. But excessive explanation often comes from fear, not clarity. It is a hidden way of asking for permission. A healthy boundary does not need a long speech. It can be simple, direct, and respectful. The more grounded you are, the less you feel the need to convince others that your limits are reasonable. Another challenge during pushback is dealing with guilt. Guilt can be powerful because it often feels like proof that you are hurting someone. But guilt is not always a sign that you are wrong. Sometimes guilt simply means you are doing something new that your nervous system is not used to. If your old identity was built around always helping, then choosing yourself may temporarily feel selfish. Even when it is deeply necessary, learning to sit with that guilt without giving in is part of healing. You can care about someone's feelings without becoming responsible for managing them. You can understand that someone is disappointed without making it your job to remove their discomfort. Mature love does not require self-abandonment. You may also face criticism from people who say you have changed. They may call you distant, difficult, selfish, or cold. This can be painful, especially if you care about them. But it is important to ask yourself a deeper question. Have I become worse, or have I simply become less available for unhealthy patterns? There is a big difference between becoming unkind and becoming unavailable for disrespect. Your goal is not to win every argument or make everyone understand. Your goal is to stay aligned with your values, even when it is uncomfortable. Respecting yourself sometimes means allowing other people to have opinions about you that are not true. You do not need to chase every misunderstanding and fix every story someone tells about you. Inner peace grows when you stop making your worth dependent on universal approval. Handling pushback also requires patience. People who are used to the old version of you may need time to adjust. Consistency matters more than intensity. You do not need one dramatic conversation to change everything. Often real change happens through small, repeated choices. Each time you calmly hold a limit, each time you refuse guilt-driven behavior, each time you stay steady under pressure, you strengthen your new identity. This process builds something deeper than confidence. It builds emotional freedom. You stop living at the mercy of other people's moods, reactions, and expectations. You stop making every decision based on whether someone might be disappointed. Instead, you begin living from truth, clarity, and self-respect. The more you stay committed during this stage, the more your life begins to shift. Your relationships become more honest. Your stress begins to reduce. Your mind becomes quieter because you are no longer carrying the exhausting job of keeping everyone comfortable all the time. This is where real peace starts, not in avoiding discomfort, but in learning that you can survive it without losing yourself. Example 1. A friend becomes upset because you no longer answer late-night calls every time they need emotional support. In the past, you would have apologized and given in, even when exhausted. This time, you calmly repeat that you care about them, but need to protect your rest. At first, they react badly, but eventually, they either adjust or reveal that they were relying on access rather than mutual respect. Example 2. A family member says, "You have changed because you no longer agree to every request that disrupts your schedule." Instead of arguing or trying to prove your intentions, you stay calm and explain your limit once. Over time, they begin to understand that your love is still there, but your self-abandonment is not. Chapter 7. Becoming respected without becoming hard and creating a life that feels true to you. One of the biggest fears people have when they begin changing is the fear of losing their softness. They worry that if they stop overgiving, stop tolerating disrespect, or stop making themselves endlessly available, they will become cold, selfish, or harsh. This fear keeps many people trapped in old patterns because they confuse boundaries with cruelty and self-respect with selfishness. But becoming respected does not require becoming hard. The goal is not to build walls around your heart. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself in the name of being good. You are not meant to become distant or emotionally unavailable. You are meant to become whole. A whole person can love deeply, care sincerely, help generously, and still protect their dignity. There is a powerful difference between kindness that comes from peace and kindness that comes from fear. Fear-based kindness is exhausting because it is often tied to approval. People who live this way are constantly scanning for what others need, how others feel, and how to avoid upsetting anyone. They become highly attentive to others while becoming disconnected from themselves. Their kindness feels heavy because it is carrying pressure, anxiety, and silent sacrifice. Peace-based kindness feels very different. It comes from choice, not obligation. It is honest, calm, and sustainable. You help because you want to, not because you are afraid of rejection. You listen because you care, not because you feel responsible for fixing everyone. You show up with love, but you no longer disappear in the process. This kind of kindness feels lighter because it is rooted in truth. You stop overextending yourself. Something beautiful begins to happen. Your relationships become more real. People start seeing the actual you instead of the version of you that was constantly adjusting to fit expectations. This can feel vulnerable at first because authenticity always carries some risk, but it also creates something far more valuable than approval. It creates genuine connection. A respected life is not built through one dramatic moment. It is built through repeated daily choices. It is built when you speak honestly, even when your voice shakes. It is built when you stop apologizing for your needs. It is built when you allow someone to be disappointed without rushing to rescue the situation. It is built when you rest without guilt and choose yourself without shame. This process also teaches you something important about love. Healthy love does not require self-betrayal. Healthy friendship does not require emotional exhaustion. Healthy work does not require constant self-sacrifice. A life that feels peaceful is not selfish. It is responsible. When you protect your energy, you are not only helping yourself, you are also making your care more genuine because it is no longer rooted in resentment. Another important part of this chapter is learning to define respect correctly. Many people chase approval while calling it respect, but approval is often conditional. It depends on how well you meet someone else's preferences. Respect is different. Respect is built when people can feel your clarity, your honesty, your emotional steadiness, and your self-worth. It does not require everyone to like you. It requires you to stop betraying yourself there. It is also deep healing in realizing that not everyone is meant to stay in your life in the same way. Some people are only comfortable with the version of you that had weak boundaries and unlimited access. As you grow, those relationships may change. Some may improve, others may fade. This can be painful, but it is also freeing because it creates space for healthier connections that do not require performance. As you continue this journey, you may notice something surprising. The peace you were trying to create by pleasing everyone was never real peace. It was tension disguised as harmony. Real peace feels different. Real peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the absence of inner war. It is the feeling of being able to sit with yourself at night, knowing that you are honest with your heart. You may still feel uncomfortable sometimes. Growth does not remove every hard emotion. There will still be moments of doubt, fear, and old habits trying to return. But now you will have something stronger than fear. You will have self-awareness, boundaries, emotional strength, and the memory of what it feels like to finally live in alignment with yourself. A respected life is not loud. It is not built through controlling others, impressing everyone, or forcing recognition. It is built quietly in the choices no one sees. The choice to leave what drains you. The choice to speak when silence hurts. The choice to rest. The choice to protect your peace. The choice to believe that your needs matter too. This is where real confidence is born. Not in perfection, but in integrity. You no longer need to chase validation because your actions are finally reflecting your truth. You no longer need to fear being misunderstood because you trust yourself enough to stand anyway. You no longer need to earn worth through exhaustion because you know your value is not something other people get to decide. You do not have to become less kind to be respected. You simply have to stop giving your kindness away in ways that destroy you. When kindness is protected by self-respect, it becomes powerful, attractive, peaceful, and deeply real. That is the kind of person people remember, not because they were easy to use, but because they were deeply genuine and impossible to overlook. Example: a person who used to always say yes to every social plan begins choosing only the gatherings that truly matter to them. They stop forcing themselves to attend out of guilt and start valuing their own time. As a result, they feel more energized, and the time they do spend with others becomes more meaningful and sincere. Example: someone in a relationship used to avoid difficult conversations because they feared losing the other person. They begin expressing their feelings, needs, and limits with honesty and calm. This creates a healthier relationship if both people are willing to grow, or it reveals that the connection was only surviving through silence. Either way, they gain peace because they are no longer hiding from themselves. Chapter 8: Maintaining your growth and not returning to old people-pleasing patterns. Reaching a stage where you finally begin to set boundaries and command. Respect is a powerful achievement, but the real challenge begins after that moment. Many people experience progress for a short time and then slowly drift back into old habits of overgiving, approval-seeking, and emotional self-neglect. This happens not because they are weak, but because old patterns feel familiar, and comfort often pulls people back into what they know, even when it harms them. Maintaining your growth requires awareness, because change is not a one-time decision. It is a continuous practice. Every day you are faced with small choices that either reinforce your new identity or pull you back into the old one. The difference is not always dramatic. It often appears in subtle moments, such as agreeing to something you do not want to do or ignoring a feeling of discomfort just to keep peace. One of the biggest threats to your progress is emotional memory. Your mind remembers how it used to survive through people pleasing. It remembers that saying yes created temporary approval and avoided conflict. So when you begin setting boundaries, your mind may try to convince you to return to old behavior because it feels safer, even though it is not healthier. This is why discipline and self-respect is more important than motivation. Motivation can fade, but discipline is built through repeated choices. You must begin to see every decision as a reinforcement of your identity. When you say yes out of fear, you are reinforcing your old self. When you say no with calm confidence, you are reinforcing your new self. Another important part of maintaining growth is learning to expect discomfort without interpreting it as failure. Many people relapse into people pleasing because they assume that discomfort means they are doing something wrong. In reality, discomfort often means you are breaking an old pattern that once controlled you. Growth almost always feels unfamiliar before it feels natural. You will also need to stay aware of environments that pull you backward. Some relationships are built on your overgiving, and when you change those relationships may try to pull you back into old roles. This does not always happen through obvious pressure. It can happen through guilt, emotional reactions, or subtle expectations that you will return to how you used to be. Staying strong in these moments requires clarity about your values. You must remind yourself why you started this journey in the first place. It was not to become distant or uncaring. It was to stop abandoning yourself. Every time you choose your peace over pressure, you strengthen your new foundation. It is also important to understand that respect is not something you earn once and keep forever. It is something you maintain through consistency. If you begin to relax your boundaries too often, people may slowly revert to treating you based on your weakest moments, not your strongest ones. This is why consistency matters more than perfection. Self-reflection becomes a powerful tool in this stage. At the end of each day, you can ask yourself simple, honest questions. Did I honor my time? Did I speak honestly? Did I say yes from peace or from pressure? These questions are not meant to create guilt, but awareness. Awareness is what keeps you aligned with your growth. Another key aspect of maintaining respect is learning to forgive yourself quickly when you slip. Growth is not about never making mistakes. It is about noticing when you return to old habits and correcting your direction without self-punishment. Harsh self-judgment often leads people to give up, but gentle correction helps them continue. As you stay committed to your new patterns, something begins to shift. Internally, you stop seeing boundaries as something you have to force and start seeing them as a natural expression of self-worth. You no longer feel the need to constantly defend your decisions because they become part of who you are, rather than something you are trying to prove. Over time, people begin to adjust to the new version of you. Some may respect you more, others may distance themselves. But the most important change is internal. You begin to feel stable in your own identity. You are no longer shaped by every demand around you. Instead, you are grounded in your own values and choices. Stage is where true emotional independence is formed. You no longer depend on external approval to feel valid. You no longer fear saying no. You no longer lose yourself in the need to be liked. Instead, you move through life with quiet confidence, knowing that your worth is not negotiable. Journey does not end here. Growth is ongoing. Life will continue to test your boundaries in different forms, but now you have awareness tools and strength to respond differently. Each time you choose yourself, you deepen your respect for yourself and naturally teach others how to respect you as well. Example 1. A person who has learned to stop overcommitting at work notices that a colleague tries to return them to old habits by asking for repeated favors. Instead of feeling guilty, they calmly decline and stay focused on their own responsibilities. Even though the colleague is disappointed at first, they eventually adjust to the new boundary and stop assuming unlimited access to their time. Example 2. Someone who has improved their relationships notices that in moments of emotional pressure, they feel tempted to revert to people-pleasing behaviors, such as over-apologizing or agreeing just to avoid conflict. Instead of giving in, they pause, reflect, and choose honesty. This small act of awareness helps them maintain their growth and strengthens their long-term emotional stability. Chapter 9. becoming emotionally independent and no longer needing external validation to feel worthy. One of the deepest transformations in this journey is emotional independence. This is the stage where you no longer depend on constant approval, reassurance, or validation from others to feel stable within yourself. For many people, this is the hardest shift because it requires letting go of a lifelong habit of measuring worth through external reactions. People who are too kind often develop a pattern of emotional dependency without realizing it. They look to others to confirm if they are doing enough, being enough, or giving enough. A simple silence from someone can feel like rejection. A lack of praise can feel like failure. A disappointed reaction can feel like personal guilt. This creates a fragile emotional state where self-worth constantly rises and falls based on external feedback. Emotional independence begins when you start recognizing that other people's reactions are not the final truth about you. Someone being upset does not automatically mean you did something wrong. Someone disagreeing with you does not mean you are disrespectful. Someone not approving of your choice does not mean your choice is invalid. This shift requires building internal validation. In simple terms, you begin learning to approve of yourself. You start asking yourself whether your actions align with your values, instead of asking others whether they approve of your decisions. This does not mean ignoring feedback or becoming. It means no longer surrendering your inner stability to outside opinions. Many people struggle with this because they were conditioned to seek approval early in life. They may have been rewarded for being obedient, quiet or helpful, and criticized for expressing needs or disagreement. Over time, they learned that acceptance came from pleasing others, not from being authentic. This conditioning becomes deeply rooted in identity. Breaking this pattern requires patience because emotional independence is not built in a single moment. It is built through repeated experiences where you choose self-trust over external validation. Each time you make a decision based on your truth rather than fear of judgment, you strengthen your emotional foundation. One important realization in this stage is that not everyone will understand your growth. Some people may prefer the version of you that was easier to influence or control. When you change, they may question, criticize, or distance themselves. This can feel painful, but it is also a sign that your identity is no longer dependent on their approval. Emotional independence does not mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop abandoning yourself to maintain connection. You can still love, support, and be present for others without losing your center. You no longer need to earn belonging by sacrificing your truth. Another important part of this stage is learning to sit with discomfort without seeking immediate reassurance. Many people rush to fix emotional discomfort by asking others for validation or apologizing unnecessarily. But emotional independence grows when you allow discomfort to exist without reacting impulsively to escape it. You begin to realize that emotions are temporary. They rise and fall, but they do not define your identity. Feeling uncertain does not mean you are wrong. Feeling misunderstood does not mean you are failing. Feeling judged does not mean you are unworthy. These are passing experiences, not permanent truths. As emotional independence develops, your relationships begin to change. You stop entering relationships from a place of neediness and start entering them from a place of choice. You are no longer trying to be accepted at any cost. Instead, you are choosing connections that respect your values. This is also the stage where loneliness may temporarily appear, not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are leaving behind old patterns that once created false connection. Some relationships may fade because they were built on your overgiving rather than mutual respect. This space is necessary for healthier connections to enter. Over time, you begin to feel a different kind of stability. You are no longer easily shaken by criticism or silence. You no longer overthink every reaction. You no longer feel the need to constantly prove your worth. Instead, you begin to rest in your own judgment, knowing that you are capable of guiding your own life. This does not mean you become perfect or immune to doubt. It means you become grounded enough to return to yourself, even when doubt appears. Emotional independence is not about never needing anyone. It is about never losing yourself in the need for anyone. When you reach this stage, your kindness becomes completely transformed. It is no longer driven by fear of rejection or desire for approval. It becomes a conscious expression of who you are. You give because you choose to, not because you need to earn love or avoid conflict. This is the true foundation of respect. Not the respect that comes from pleasing others, but the respect that comes from being deeply aligned with yourself. When you no longer abandon your truth for acceptance, you naturally begin to command a quiet and lasting respect from others without forcing it. Example 1. A person receives criticism about a decision they made at work. In the past, they would have immediately doubted themselves and sought reassurance from others. This time they listen, reflect, and evaluate the feedback calmly without losing confidence in their own judgment. They realize that one opinion does not define their entire capability. Example 2. Someone notices that a friend becomes distant after they start setting boundaries. Instead of panicking or over-explaining, they accept the change and continue honoring their values. They understand that their worth is not determined by how others react to their growth, and they continue building a life based on self-respect. Chapter 10. The final transformation, living with quiet power and unshakable self-respect. At this stage of your journey, something deeply important begins to happen. You are no longer just learning boundaries, or practicing saying no, or trying to appear confident. You are becoming someone who naturally lives with self-respect as a way of being, rather than something you must constantly remind yourself to do. This transformation is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not need to be proven to anyone. It is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted within you. You no longer feel the need to explain your worth to people who cannot see it. You no longer feel the urge to chase approval from those who misunderstand you. You no longer collapse inward when someone disagrees with you. Instead, you remain grounded in your own understanding of who you are. The biggest shift at this stage is internal. You stop negotiating your value. You stop shrinking your truth. You stop adjusting your identity to fit every environment around you. You begin to realize that respect is not something you request. It is something that naturally emerges when you stop abandoning yourself. Many people think the final stage of growth is about being admired or recognized by others. But true transformation has nothing to do with external recognition. It has everything to do with inner alignment. When your actions, your thoughts, and your values all begin to move in the same direction, you experience a deep sense of peace that no external validation can replace. At this point, you begin to notice that your relationships have changed. Some people have naturally moved closer to you because your authenticity feels safe and stable. Others have moved away because they were never comfortable with your truth. This is not loss in the traditional sense. Your life begins to filter itself based on honesty rather than obligation. You also begin to notice that your emotional reactions have changed. Situations that once triggered anxiety or overthinking no longer control your state of mind. You still feel emotions, but you are no longer controlled by them. There is a gap between what happens and how you respond, and in that gap, you find your freedom. Quiet power is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. It is not about dominance or control. It is about stability. A person with quiet power does not need to prove anything. They do not rush to respond to every opinion. They do not feel threatened by disagreement. They do not lose themselves in the approval or disapproval of others. They simply remain steady in who they are. This kind of presence naturally earns respect without effort. People begin to feel your boundaries without you having to enforce them aggressively. They understand your limits because you live them consistently. Your silence has weight. Your words have meaning. Your choices carry clarity. At this stage, kindness becomes completely transformed. It is no longer an emotional reaction, driven by fear of rejection or desire to be liked. It becomes intentional. You choose when to give and when to hold back. You choose where to invest your energy. You choose who gets access to your time and attention based on alignment, not obligation. One of the most powerful realizations in this final stage is that peace is not found in pleasing everyone. Peace is found in no longer betraying yourself for anyone. When you stop performing a version of yourself for acceptance, you begin to experience a deeper and more stable form of happiness. You also develop a strong sense of emotional clarity. You can quickly recognize when something feels right or wrong for you without needing external confirmation. You trust your instincts more. You trust your boundaries more. You trust your ability to handle outcomes more. This trust becomes the foundation of your confidence. Another important change is that fear of judgment loses its control over you. You understand that people will always have opinions. Some will understand you, but you no longer allow those opinions to define your direction. You stop living as a reaction to others and start living as an expression of yourself. This does not mean life becomes perfect or free from challenges. You will still face difficult people, situations, and emotions. But your relationship with those experiences has changed. You no longer see them as threats to your identity. You see them as moments that you can move through without losing yourself. At this point, your self-respect is no longer something you have to consciously practice. It becomes your default state. You naturally choose what is healthy. You naturally avoid what drains you. You naturally speak with clarity and calmness, because anything less feels misaligned with who you have become. The most beautiful part of this transformation is that you no longer need to fight for respect. You simply live in a way that makes disrespect unsustainable. People either rise to meet your level, or they distance themselves, but you no longer bend yourself to maintain connection. This is the final freedom. Not the freedom of having everything you want, but the freedom of no longer abandoning yourself for anything or anyone. You are no longer living from fear. You are no longer living from approval. You are living from truth. And in that truth, you find something most people spend their entire lives searching for. 1. A person who once constantly worried about how others perceive them now attends social situations without overthinking every word they say. They express themselves naturally, listen without anxiety, and leave conversations without replaying them in their mind. Their peace comes from knowing they were authentic, not perfect. Example 2. Someone in the past used to stay in relationships or environments that drained them simply to avoid being alone. Now they make decisions based on alignment rather than fear. They walk away from situations that do not respect their values and feel calm rather than guilty, because they understand that self-respect is not negotiable. Conclusion. This journey is not about becoming someone else. It is about returning to yourself without fear and without apology. It is about removing the habits that made you abandon your own needs in order to keep others comfortable and learning. Instead, to stand in your truth with calm confidence. You do not become more valuable by giving everything away. You become more respected when you begin to respect yourself first. The moment you stop treating your time, energy, and emotions as something others can misuse, you begin to experience a different kind of life. This transformation does not happen overnight. It happens through small, repeated choices. Each time you say no when you need to, each time you speak honestly instead of silently enduring, each time you choose rest over guilt, you are rebuilding your identity. You will not be understood by everyone, and that is part of growth. Some people benefited from the version of you that had no boundaries, and they may resist the new version of you. But you are not here to remain convenient. You are here to become whole. Real respect is not something you chase. It is something that naturally appears when you stop shrinking yourself. You do not need to force it or demand it. You simply need to live in alignment with your values and let your actions speak for you. In the end, the greatest freedom is not having everyone approve of you. It is being able to look at your life and feel at peace with how you treated yourself. The end.
Kindly subscribe to my channel.